had a chance to speak a little bit briefly before we got going, and I was struck by the many number of topics that these four came up with that they could talk with you about. We just heard a tremendous list of all the challenges, and so I'm not going to repeat all of those, but we are going to try to go through as many as we possibly can in the time we have and share some thoughts about challenges and insights. These four people represent 4 of the 34 largest school districts in the country. And they've also served long enough that they've accumulated a tremendous amount of insights about the challenges. And so we're going to try to tap into that today. And I will ask them some questions. We will see if we can keep them from taking over the stage and not letting us participate. And then if we can get it done quickly enough, there may be some time for all of your questions for the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about. Fair enough? All right, excellent. So we're going to start. Oh, wait, I should probably say, just for the record, their names are on the program, but that's John, Charles, Trena, and David. So a week after the election, the issue of priorities in education, right, is top of mind for lots of people. And so I wanted to ask you as panelists, who is setting those priorities right now? Is it educators? Is it parents? Is it students? Is it local or federal government pressures? And what really are the drivers that are either making your decision-making and processes easier or creating disruption and challenge? And I'm going to pick on Trena.
I know you kept looking
Sorry.
at me. So I'm like, all right, I get to go first. Well, I am the only female up here. So. Of course. All right, so our priorities at Denver Public Schools are pretty much set based on our purpose. And our purpose is to educate kids. So whether you're operations or your academics or your schools, those priorities are based on kids and educating kids. So we call it educational equity. And so that's our motto. So if our superintendent speaks and he asks what our purpose is, educational equity. I believe that it's all of the above. It takes a village. So you can't just set priorities based on what the parents say, what the students say. It has to be a collaboration. Our strategies, we have a strategic roadmap. So when our superintendent came on board, he did a road show across the district. So he listened to our parents, he listened to our students, our staff, our educators. We wanted to get a perspective from a very broad perspective as he set our goals. And so we have adult experience, student experience, and system experience that's encompassing of our strategic roadmap. We also, as we think about facilities and operations and how we define our work, it's based on safe and welcoming. All of our students and our adults need to walk into a facility that's safe and welcoming. You cannot learn if you feel as if your life is threatened or that environment is not conducive to that learning. Within our facilities, it's enabling the conditions. We're there to support learning. So it's not just that we're a boiler tech or an HVAC tech or a plumber. We're there to facilitate learning and enabling those conditions so that our educators can thrive. Transportation is access, and it's ensuring that kids have choice. We have our strategic ops that's within my department, where we are managing the data, the assessment, charter school authorization. So we're supporting all of our partners, and I'm going to go, I know everyone else has to speak, but food is nutrition. We have tech with innovation, AI, quantum. So we're thinking about what are the innovations in education, but we're partnering with our schools and our academics to support that. And the decisions that we make are hand in hand with all of our school leaders as well. So
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
I genuinely don't remember. Who does your superintendent report to?
The Board of Education.
So it is a board, it's not, because
Yes.
the reason I asked that is, Pete, when you asked the question, you mentioned the election and you mentioned priorities and prioritization. And one of the things that we struggle with all the time is, it should be an easy answer to that question, right? Well, of course, the educators should be the one that set the agenda, but it's not always that way. And in New York City, we have mayoral control. They've rebranded as mayoral accountability. But, there are tremendous, sounds great, right? It changed the world. But it now gives them the thought that they can actually set the priorities. So it's interesting to me to hear what you're able to accomplish and how you set the priorities when you're reporting to a board, which is different than the politician.
And we're under policy governance, where our superintendent is given reasonable interpretation. Well, he has reasonable interpretation, but he's given ends policies in which then he can interpret our goals and our policies and how he execute those. And those go through our boards.
So everything they said, right, about the same. In our case, in Chicago, 634 schools, about 100 or so of those are charters. And the challenge of being managed by committee is equitable voices and being able to listen to each voice. So we're also, our CEO/superintendent is also managed by the board. Board is appointed by the mayor, and we're the lucky candidates going from 7 board members to 21 board members in January. Yeah, so thumbs up for that. I do. On that point, I do think it's an opportunity to, similar to what Trena was saying, is that being managed by what I call the committee is with that voice. We took a specific and guided approach with our strategic plan this year. And so part of that was we developed, our process and enhanced it for our educational facility master plan. And in the book, I call it, my next initiative is EF&P 2.0. And in this case, we went out to all the communities, 16 sessions in the community to hear their voice. What were they looking for? What were the intentions of what they wanted to see for facility enhancements? And we learned a lot. We also learned some of the same in regards to how people really want turf fields and playgrounds and, all the standard upgrades. In our case, the challenge of the $3 billion in deferred maintenance, we had to take a step back and really educate the community about what that means. So not only $3 billion in deferred maintenance, but when we did our facility condition assessment, we discovered it's going to cost us about $14.4 billion to bring all the buildings to where they need to be. And so part of our engagement, we established an equity index, to try to ground everybody. Like, we can't do all this, but here's our equity index, and how can we, move funds in the appropriate place to make sure that we prioritize the repairs. And so right now, still in the early stages, but we've got a plan. We just got $600 million in our bonding, and so the prioritization for that in the communities that make the most sense, because you do have the haves and the have-nots still, but we want to make sure that we're allocating the right funds in the right spaces for the standard things, the HVAC upgrades, the green initiatives, the standard bathroom upgrades. So that's really important and significant for us for the next 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and on a lot of those things, Charles and I have a lot in common. And in fact, I'm most proud of the fact that we are finishing up in Palm Beach. We're finishing up our first bond referendum, 10-year referendum. It's getting near the end, and it was focused on our deferred maintenance, getting our schools back up to a higher standard. My pride is that we just passed the other day a referendum for the next 10 years. And that is for our planned maintenance. And that's one of our commitments to our community. Our charge is we are our community's best choice. Charter schools are there also, but we know we're competing with everybody to give them that best education. And we've made that commitment to our community that we were going to ensure the best quality facilities going forward. It's not just a hope and prayer that we've got a budget for 2 years. It's got to be a 10-year plan. In fact, we have a 50-year plan on our buildings. For those of you in South Florida, buildings don't last nearly as long as some of the others I noticed our school district, our average age is 27 years. So we have a 50-year life cycle for our buildings, and we have to make sure that we maintain each and every one of them at that highest level. And to that end, we try to spend a lot of our money in the long term, not just the Band-Aid work. That's been one of our biggest focuses. But otherwise, as far as everyone else said, yes, a lot of our priorities are set through our board, through our educators, and again, from our perspective, is that our operations team are focused on excellence.
What I loved about meeting all of you was the extent to which you could continue to take a facilities issue and just keep talking about its importance for education, its importance for the students, right? You each in a different way were doing that. And I'm excited for all of these conversations for that to be the focus here and not kind of drill into specific issues of a bond issue or dollars. So thank you for that.
I want to add to Charles and all of his board members. So our board members are
I love our board.
our board members are not allowed to contact staff. And so with that, we can't repurpose our priorities. So they have to go through our chief of staff or the superintendent in order to speak with staff. Sometimes they'll call and say, oops, I know I'm not supposed to talk to you, but, and I'll ask permission for them.
I want to take us in a slightly different direction and ask you about enrollment issues. It's a big issue. I think Education Week this summer indicated that we'd have 3 million less students in the country by 2031 than we had back in 2013. But it's not equivalent, right, across the country. Over the last few years, I think 18 states were shrinking significantly, 6 were growing significantly. And I think in that report they talked about California, which was growing, was going to be shrinking again by 2031. So it's all over the place. I'm wondering how this issue of managing the implications of enrollment change is playing out in your communities right now. And I'm curious, is it different than any other time, right? Enrollments go up and down and they move and they shift, and you've all dealt with that. I'm wondering if the four of you have any insights about it. Is it particularly different or unique at this moment?
Are you looking at me again?
No, I'm not. I'm going to ask John.
Sure. So I think New York is a little unique in a couple of ways. When I've been with New York City for 16 years and change. When I got there in 2008, we had 1.1 million students. We had about 1,400 buildings, 130 million square feet. We're now at 1,500 buildings and 135 million square feet. So we have increased significantly in just my tenure. We did see a decline in enrollment, particularly during COVID. A lot of people moved out of New York City. Enrollment went down to like 970, something like that. But we didn't do anything with the space at that time. We started to project what that would mean for the future. Since then, we've actually seen an increase in enrollment. We have a tremendous amount of the migrant population that has come to the United States, end up in New York City, and that's great for us because it's actually increased our enrollment. We get paid by the students, so that's been a good thing for us. We're still not back to the 1.1 million, but the biggest impact to our building portfolio is the class size law that was passed by the city and the state about a year ago, 2 years ago, which is now mandating hard caps that's implemented on a schedule through 2028. So by 2028, high schools have to be capped at 25, 4th grade through 8th grade have to be capped at 23 students per classroom, and elementary school is at 20. So those are real serious numbers, whatever space we had. The other thing in New York City is that all of our charter schools, not all, the vast majority of our charter schools are placed in DOE buildings. So I run the maintenance and the facilities for the charter schools, even though that they are a separate entity. So all of those things are impacting on the limited amount of real estate that we already have. We're still in a growth mode. We're still looking to purchase and expand into the future, but I'm not sure that my colleagues have the same issues.
You guys live in a similar experience or something different?
Well, I was going to say these two. I think you guys were
A little bit different.
Different.
I'm more like
I hate to be the unique one on the stage, but you know, times call for it. So you know, we also had a decline. So about maybe 10, 15 years ago, we were 400,000 plus strong. And in our case, with the decline in enrollment, we did make the tough decision in 2013 to close about 49. We'll just call it 50 schools, and what that did was a game changer. it was a game changer in a couple ways because there were promises made that academic support, academic excellence would increase. But we recently had a report from the University of Chicago where it did not. And so we're in this unique situation where with still the decline in enrollment, where we've just stabilized because of many of the newcomers who are coming in still have a lot of space, right? We got over 10 million square feet that we manage, and in some cases, just sometimes maybe about 100 kids in a building. So what we're doing, the unique thing that we're doing, because we're not at a point where we've made or had the conversation about closure of schools, but we like to invest in the schools. So I'm taking a different approach. The approach that we're taking is space efficiency. So in our case, we are, maybe a 3-floor building, but, it can accommodate maybe the first or 2 floors. So I'm shutting down, that 3rd floor just to, be able to save some space, be able to manage the resources a little bit better from our custodians and all the support personnel. And the approach is to how can we reinvest in schools that have been disinvested over a period of time. And, if you look at Chicago, in our case, I'll use the neighborhood North Lawndale. And you can go ahead and web search North Lawndale, during the Dr. King era where Dr. King was assassinated. It had, riot-based fires that created harm. And that particular neighborhood was disinvested since the 60s all the way up until today. And so we made the bold decision in that case, in that specific neighborhood, to invest $40 million in 3 of the schools to be able to bring equity back. Because we know what the schools look like. They're the fabric of the community. They're the fabric of the city. So if you remove a school, then you're removing all the economic factors that tie to it. Businesses and communities. So we're doing the reverse here to see what that looks like.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and we're taking a somewhat different approach. So we have 16 million square feet, 90,000 students, 206 school buildings. We've conducted a strategic regional analysis to look at the trends. And so over the last 10 years, and my phone keeps ringing, over the last 10 years, our our enrollment has been decreasing, and that's due to low birth rates across Colorado, and I think across the nation. So our enrollment peaked in 2019, but since 2019, it's continued to go down. And so we are 5,000 fewer students than we were back in 2019. So we're losing about 1,600 students a year within Denver Public Schools, around the kindergarten level. And so what the strategic regional analysis revealed is that there's certain areas of our city that's growing, and there's certain areas that are declining. And so we just, Thursday of last week, our superintendent presented to the board 7 closures and 3 schools where we'll be restructuring those schools. And so there may be some cases where it's currently a high school, and that high school may become a middle school. There's some schools that are currently maybe an elementary school, and that elementary school may move into another school so that we can combine. Different from what you guys are doing in Chicago, we've tried to limit the space that school leaders or students would go into, but then they would spread out. And so it's the same cost with utilities and maintenance and upkeep as it would be if we would just, keep the whole school open. So we're choosing to close those schools. We may repurpose them. We have partnerships with the city. We need professional development because right now we're renting out space in other school districts or other organizations. We may use them for those type of things. Kindergarten is decreasing, so some of those kindergartners may be repurposed into other facilities. 44% of our students participate in school choice, and so they're moving to other areas of the district. And so those are some of the approaches that we're taking in our district.
Florida?
We're somewhat similar to John's environment. We're continuing to grow. We have not suffered the drop off in students. So we built a few new schools in the last couple of years. We are continuing to grow. Some of our communities, our western communities, are still expanding. So we do have that opportunity. But we are limited by some of our government legislation. For example, any schools we build, we have cost per student station calculations now established by the state that limits how much money we can spend. And what that's translated to is the impact to the classroom size. Can only have certain square footage of cafeteria to serve certain number of students, and those have made it more difficult to build a school and operate. Whereas I feel like we're missing out on the idea of what spaces are needed for students. Now, from my perspective, I'm really excited because I get to work for my district. We built out a lot. My predecessor, who happens to be sitting in the audience, went through a massive growth to build a lot of schools. So now we're slowing it down. But I have the pleasure of working for a superintendent who was formerly our CFO. And it's a different mindset. A lot of the academics that run school districts, they know what they're doing when it comes to the academic side. Our superintendent, he is very well versed in a lot of the academic sides, but he realizes how important it is for us to operate good, effective schools. To the point where now one of his biggest focuses, what we're focusing on turning some of our ancillary space into continuing education, to adult education, recognizing that there's a lot of students that we serve that are not college bound, they're not college ready. And we, on the maintenance side, on the operations side, we certainly would love to have some of those kids get trained and come to work for us. Well, the great news is a lot of our kids are now getting trained in these programs, and then they're making way more than we can afford to pay them. So that's the downside, but good for the kids. We need the kids to recognize that there are paths to success that don't involve college, and I think that's one of our biggest advantages these days.
Yeah, that's great, John.
So that's really interesting to me on the cap. How does that work from the state? Is that a hard cap, or is that they won't pay above a certain amount and then the district can fund the rest? Because I see that as a glaring equity issue.
And it's a challenge. It's an equity issue not only within a school, but within the regions of a state. I mean, the state of New York,
Right.
The state of Florida, people that live in the Panhandle, it's a completely different environment than the people that live in South Florida. The cost of building something is dramatically different in South Florida, but the cost per student station requirement is the same across the state, and it basically makes us become, we in the more affluent areas, be more creative in order to try to establish that equity across the board. And I'll be the first to say, yes, I may seem like I'm part of an affluent community, but while I have some of the richest schools in the state, I also have some of the poorest. So it is a challenge all the way around to make sure that when I build something, that it does not have that sense of, well, that's in a rich area, so of course they got all the good stuff. No, we've got to come up with a standard in which everybody is evenly successful.
That's wild. I want to go back to the comment you made about continuing education and ask all of you about this notion of continuing and technical education, that's happening across the country. And I'm just curious how it's playing out. You were sharing some of those things in Florida. I'm wondering for the other three of you how that's playing out and what the implications are for your communities. And are you training anybody that's sticking around as opposed to just leaving once they get back?
I think in Denver, we are focused on CTE.
Yeah.
We just passed a $975 million bond program. So one of the areas was, I mentioned the safe and welcoming, enabling condition. The other area is enabling your passion. And so we're focused on athletics and arts and STEAM, and then also the trades. And so we'll be implementing, I want to say it's 12 additional CTE-focused programs across the district. We want to ensure that we have programs in every area of the district. Right now, we only had 3 sites that focused on CTE. And so if you had a student over in an area, and I'm going to say less affluent area, that student may have a difficult time because we did not provide transportation, being able to participate in that program. And so now by having them regionally placed, then we're able to offer that CTE across the district. We're also within our technology department, our facilities department, planning, design, and construction. We're focused on bringing in those apprentices. Our program has not grown to the level of our vision, but we just a couple of weeks ago had students come through. They'll be doing ride-alongs with our staff, and then the apprenticeship programs will start thereafter.
That's tremendous.
I'm very similar in that case. The only thing that I would add is when we contract with our suppliers, with our vendors, I think that is a key opportunity to be able to write within the contract, apprenticeship programs.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we have a great partnership with JLL, who helps support us in all of our maintenance and repairs. And part of that contract, that agreement that we made, is to be able to build a pipeline for our students, to build that pipeline of engineers. And as soon as they come out of high school, they have a guaranteed job. They actually also support, it's a turnkey model with the testing, all the training. So I think that's significantly important. And we want to scale that, with some of our other suppliers as well, because we want to make sure that we also have a great partnership with our union partners. I think that's significantly important, where, to build, again, that same kind of mentality of pipelines to bring, students to post-secondary success that may not always be college.
Yeah.
So it's pretty simple in that mindset.
Let me add, because we're doing some of that. One of the challenges that we've had, we do have some parents that say, "Are you pushing my kids more into trade versus college?" And so that's been, it's not a large population, but it is some noise that's out there in the community is, are we encouraging, and then are we focusing on our Black and brown kids not going to college versus, so we're trying to ensure we have that equity, we're providing the education around it, what the opportunities are, and then those mentorships.
Yeah.
And the students can advocate and make their own choices, but that is a challenge as well.
So in New York, I think we have to differentiate between the district policy and, because we're school facilities folks, what school facilities is doing individually. As a district, New York City has a director of student pathways. It's an entire division that's devoted to trying to figure out which is, both college and career readiness and giving robust treatment to both. And we think that's very important. We are very sensitive to the issue that, Black and brown kids might be pushed into non-college areas, but I also say that my plumber makes a bigger hourly rate than my lawyer and arguably provides a more important service. So don't judge, don't criticize. So New York City itself is doing a lot in that area, but specifically for school facilities, one of the proudest moments of my career was back during the Bloomberg administrations, probably 12 or 13 years ago. There was this movement to break up larger high schools into smaller high schools, and usually around a theme. You would start new schools to be able to provide more success to kids. I worked with Columbia University to develop and implement a high school based on CTE, the High School for Energy and Technology. We put it in the Grace Dodge campus in the Bronx. It was a great idea. We were very proud of that. We tried to make it work. One of the saddest parts of my career was that it didn't work. And there's still so much more work that needs to be done, in my opinion, on the state and federal level to be able to make CTE a real viable option. Because the issue was we couldn't find instructors. When you're trying to start a school around HVAC maintenance, and you have people out there in the world making a really good salary, and you tell them that you can teach high school kids, yeah, I really want to do that. And because of the rules, you're only allowed to start at a UFT standard $60,000 a year. Plus, you need to go back to college and get credits. You can't just partner an industry person with a teacher in the school. So we just couldn't find the right people to do the career part of the education. And that's a real disappointment, and that's something that we work on. But where we are successful is we do have a very robust internship program where we work with the Pathways folks and put people working with our skilled trades folks. We have 400 skilled trades people working directly for New York City Public Schools, and we match them up with plumbers, electricians. We've actually expanded into energy engineers and auditing and some of the non-hard construction trades. And that's been an overwhelming success. And usually the summer program works better because you're able to give kids full-time hours over the summer, whereas during the year they can only do it after school and it has to be in their neighborhood. But we figured out a way to make it work. But just engaging those kids in a more direct way has been great for them, and it's been really great for us.
Yep.
John, you mentioned, is it a difference between the K-12 pathway versus the adult education? That we find that it's a lot easier to get teachers to get apprenticeship programs for the adults because the vendors, those guys are looking for a pipeline.
Absolutely,
They want
yes.
the easy
Right.
path of these 11th and 12th graders that are going to be coming in a couple of years on that apprenticeship program. I could see it being a challenge having a K-12 educator. Is it the same? Are you suffering the same problem on the adult side?
No.
Not at all.
Now in New York, most of that is done by private. We don't do a lot of adult
Yeah.
continuing education, but the stuff that we do, you're 100% right. It's the issue of moving that instruction into a K-12 environment, and the rules change, and that's where it stops.
Yeah, we've got experiences in our area where, and we don't do it in our district yet, but where the continuing education facility runs from 11th and 12th grade all the way through, and it's a daytime program. And you say, well, how do the daytime programs work for a lot of these people that are working? It manages to work, and that's our growth. That's where we're heading, is trying to find the way to make it amenable for everybody. The challenge that we all experience, and I'm sure you've all experienced it as well, is trying to be everything for everybody at all times. And we love to be everybody, but sometimes we have to make our choices and divvy up the work.
Welcome to public service, right?
That's right.
There you go. Yeah.
It's such an interesting topic. You're all talking about this issue and the notion of finding people, the staffing issue that you were crossing over into, right? And one of the cruel ironies in the college world, of course, is it's all about getting people to get college degrees, which means you're not training anybody to be a plumber, so they can't find any plumbers to change the pipes out in colleges, right? And you're living that same reality, and I think you're at the forefront as you talk about it, moving it forward. But it's complicated and it creates interesting stresses, I think, in the K-12 schools. I want to leave some time for all of you. I want to ask one more question here of you folks about sort of sustainability and greening and carbon issues, and how is that playing out? How is that affecting, or what are you experimenting with right now? Was there anything new going on, or anything you're particularly excited about? We heard some interesting things about what's happening in Tucson. I'm just curious if there's something that all of you are fired up about.
Yeah, one of my biggest initiatives is I'm completely outsourced for transportation services right now. So using about 20-25 vendors to be able to bus kids to and from. And, you know, we recently got awarded the grant from the feds to up to 50 electric buses are on the queue, so about 20 million. So now it's really building that ecosystem of not only procuring the buses, but actually building, you know, the staff to maintain it and solidifying the site to be able to do that. So really excited about that initiative, and then we're continuing to expand from our building standpoint on green initiatives, you know, more solar. We're really looking at all types of grants to see where we can get any type of dollar to be able to expand on some type of green or sustainability initiative.
And we're focusing on mainly 6 areas within our sustainability program. We do have a policy as well around climate action that was passed by our board. It was student-led. And so I mentioned all the voices in the room. So our students actually set some of our goals. So built environment is one. This is where we have that collaboration. How do we build our buildings? What are our standards, our specifications? Smart buildings. We did just build within our 2020 bond our first all-electric building. Transportation. We have a grant for 20 buses. My transportation ED is not really thrilled about having 20 because we do not in Colorado have the infrastructure in place yet for the buses. They have not been delivered, but we're hoping to spread that out over maybe 10 this next year and 10 the following year. Also concerned about will there be a grant once the end of life of those buses, because they're a lot more expensive. And so how are we going to keep up with the replacement, the battery life, and all of those things? Resource management is another area. So energy management, water conservation, partnering, so sustainability partners with facilities and planning, design, and construction to ensure that we're thinking about those areas. Wellness, so we have gardens, we have greenhouses, we have farms, and then a nutrition plan that we're bringing in place. Environmental justice and education, so ensuring that our students have the education and our parents as well. We have community hubs where we're offering not only mental health supports, but sustainability and understanding how do you conserve in your own home. So students and parents can learn about that ECHO school certification, environmental justice, and then career and curriculum. And so our sustainability is also tied within with our academics so that educators, and this is part of the policy, where it's a requirement for them to host so many educational components within their curriculum. And then quickly, our 5-year goals on our built environment. So 80% of our heating load for 10 buildings over the next 5 years will be all electric, 65% of electricity supplied by renewables. 2 existing building envelopes incorporate findings in a financial impact assessment. We actually conducted a financial impact assessment across the entire district, and it was pretty costly, and so we decided to reduce sustainable landscape, sustainable design standards, and then implementing those smart buildings. These are also tied in with our superintendent's goals, and so the board will gauge. So in that way, we're helping our superintendent to also meet his initiatives.
At the risk of offending my 2 other friends, I'm going to ask you guys to hang on a second because we're nearing the end of the time, and I want to throw this out to the crowd. We haven't talked about safety. We haven't talked about budgets. We haven't talked about conditions. We haven't finished talking about sustainability, but in the 6 minutes and 15 seconds we have left before Chris throws us off the stage, are there questions that are pressing on your mind? Yes,
Oh,
there
boy.
are questions. Yes,
Oh,
your
boy.
hand up first.
Here, let me get you a microphone.
Everyone, this is amazing. Is this being recorded? And if not,
What, is it an
Yeah.
inappropriate
So be
question?
careful what you say now.
then the conversation podcast or something so that we could continue to listen and be engaged with this conversation.
I think that's a great idea.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, here we go.
Talking about repurposing of schools and things like that in student enrollment declining. In the state of New Mexico, our governor has, and the legislature has turned where all pre-K is free or reduced now for all kids throughout the state. So the issue of childcare has always been an issue. Well, now in the state, we now have pre-K. And so for everybody. So, are you guys all addressing that, utilizing pre-K? Because nothing was talked about pre-K yet, and how you're going to address pre-K, or is that an initiative that you all will address or look at in your district? And repurposing of schools to turn to pre-K.
I can kick this off. So several years ago, we saw the writing on the wall, and to be able to plan for it, we started our reinvestment in all pre-K initiatives. So making adjustments in particular schools to give them some pre-K programs, making adjustments in coordination with our mayor and our other constituents to be able to for parents to have options on where they can go in every single neighborhood. Every single neighborhood had one, but we wanted to beef it up a little bit, make it look great and have a great experience, and be able to have our teachers prepared at a point where when the students come in, they just have a welcoming experience from both their standpoint and a facility-based standpoint. The challenge is we need people to have babies. So
Exactly.
it looks great,
Exactly.
but no babies coming. So if you know somebody moving to Chicago, send them our way. I mean, we'll take them on.
Once you get kids in pre-K, try to keep them in the district to where you're.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once they're there, then we
Very
keep them along the way. But you gotta have the babies to come in to be able to do that. So.
We John, that was on the envelope of the inappropriate question.
We got the chancellor in New York City over that.
I think we got time. We got time for one more question from this gentleman, then we'll wrap it up.
So you all mentioned consolidating schools, what do you do to mitigate pushback from the community for like historic buildings?
So we have not closed any historic buildings, but we did have an extensive community process. And so our community weighed into, so we basically illustrated, here's the process, here's what the board mandated that the superintendent conduct in order to close buildings. We have to engage our community. We need to have processes and procedures whereby we will close those buildings. What's the criteria for closing a building? Is it academic performance? Is it low enrollment within the schools, condition of the building? And so with our community voice, and of course, we still got pushback, then we were able to, well, it just happened on Thursday was the announcement, but our board meeting was not disruptive. I'm sure there's going to be some push, but that's the way we conducted our.
John, you have a few historic buildings in your portfolio.
We do, but luckily, because we need them all, we're not giving any back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
we don't. The few that we do have, we don't. And if anything, we're actually taking all our money and putting it towards those, rehabilitating them. Ones that have been left behind, we're reconstituting them for academic purposes and community purposes as well.
The only question we've had on our historic buildings was related to safety. And so that's part of our bond initiative as well. So we're building, not all of our schools, some viewers may have secure vestibules. And so we did have alumni and community kind of push back on building a secure vestibule within a historic building because it takes away from the aesthetics. And Historic Society says, I thought you should build it to match. It needs to be the complete opposite. So you have to be able to determine that this is new and it's not part of the original design of that building.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you to the four of you. You've done everything I was hoping to do, which was actually have an engaged conversation that was so inspiring that someone wants to hear you keep talking. Because we were worried about that they would you would drone on and it would get difficult. So, but thank you as well for making this a conversation about excellence in education for our children, right? That's why everybody's in this room, and we want to stay focused on that. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
So let's hear it for